Hello everyone and welcome to Big Rock Moto. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Kawasaki has seen major success in recent years with its small to mid-displacement Ninja and Z series of street motorcycles. Popular with both new and experienced riders alike, bikes like the Ninja 400 and 500 and Z400 and 500 offer an approachable and accessible riding experience for a price that most people can afford. For 2024, Kawasaki have significantly improved their Ninja and Z platform by giving us a larger engine, new bodywork, new lighting, new dashboards, and a host of other upgrades and improvements. So the question is this new Z500 the best beginner bike that can also keep more experienced riders happy? That's what we're going to find out today. All right, so as we get going into this review, I just have a quick question, and I'm hoping you can put your input or your answer down in a comment below. If you were looking for a bike in this segment and you were forced to buy either this, the Ninja 500, the fully fared version of this, the KTM 390 Duke, a Honda CB500F, or the CFMOTO 450 NK, which one would you buy and why? So please put that down below in the comments. I think that'll be a really interesting discussion. Let's talk about models and pricing for the Z500. And I want to start out by talking about what did Kawasaki change versus the outgoing Z400. So the engine is different. It's got a 6.8 millimeter longer stroke, and the displacement goes up to 451 cc with a pretty significant bump in power and torque. You've also got new bodywork and a new fuel tank design. You have new LED lighting, and you have new display options. You've got the updated LCD, and then you have the updated color TFT on this SE model. Let's also talk about the Ninja versus the Z. So the Ninja is going to be your fully fared sport bike, and your Z is going to be your naked bike. So really it comes down to a couple things. Which style do you like better? Do you want the full wind coverage of having like the lower fairings of the Ninja? But you also have to consider a couple practical things. One, which is the ergonomics or the riding position, and two is going to be like insurance costs. So the riding position is a little bit more relaxed on the Z. Now, between the Z and the Ninja, there's not a huge difference on the 500 Ninja versus the Z500 in the riding position. But you do get a clip-on handlebar on the Z versus a tubular handlebar. A clip-on on the Ninja versus a tubular handlebar on the Z. So you have to consider that. Typically, the naked bikes have more roomy ergonomics, a roomier rider triangle, a little bit more comfortable for longer rides. And you get that sporty riding position with something like the Ninja. Also, insurance costs tend to be higher almost across the board when you get to a fully fared motorcycle. The reason for that is in crashes or tip overs, you get a full fairing and it's much more expensive to fix that versus a naked bike. So pricing on the Z500, the standard Z500 is $55.99, and the SE model, the bike you see here in this review, is $6,299. So there's a $700 upcharge to get the SE model. Now, what do you get for that, and should you get it? My answer is yes, you should get the SE model, and here's why. You get a full color TFT display, you get a windscreen, you get a radiator screen, you get frame sliders, a passenger seat cowl, a tank pad, LED turn signals, knee pads, and a USB-C charging port. So if you wanted to add all those things to your standard Z500, it's not really going to be either possible or financially viable to do that. So you're just better off spending the $700 up front and getting the SE. If you don't care about any of that stuff I just listed, then sure, get the standard model. But I just think most people, if you like the stuff on that list, I would just go for this SE. I think that's a really good deal.
You can see, the acceleration on the Z500 is very good. It's not anything, record-breaking, but it's not slow, and you can out-accelerate most traffic, no problem. Cruising along here at 60 miles an hour or about 100 kilometers an hour, it's very comfortable. At this It's 60 miles an hour. It's about 5,500 RPM. And the buzz doesn't set in at this speed, so that's good. And you'll get good fuel economy cruising around at a speed like this. You know what I noticed riding this bike? I'm just lean forward a little bit, which kind of braces me into the wind, which is great. And it's a pretty comfortable place to be. So the engine, you know, it sounds okay, but kind of sounds like an angry vacuum cleaner. It doesn't have the best sound. Man, these small bikes are so much fun. You! Whoops. Camera issues there. Yow! Full power. Woo! It's super fun to do this. Now, you do feel the buzz coming through the engine above 6,000 RPM. So it seems to be about that 6,000 RPM mark where you feel a buzz through the seat and the handlebars and the foot pegs. It's not terrible, but it's something that you're going to notice. Power! See, if you think a 500 or a 450 is not enough power, I mean, that's really not the case. I mean, I'm going uphill in a mountain road, accelerating, you know, in third gear up to 80 miles an hour. So it's really, it has plenty of power to do whatever you need to do.
Let's look at the riding position seat height of the Z500. 30.9 inches seat height, or about 785 millimeters. Pretty decent, not as low as some cruisers out there, but not bad. Let me show you the riding position. So I've actually been really pleasantly surprised by how comfortable the Z500 is. I kind of expected to be a bit more cramped, but I'm really not. I'm 5'10" or 1.78 meter. I have a 32-inch inseam. I weigh about 200 pounds or 90 kilograms. I'm a fairly big American guy. And you can see that the riding position, yeah, my knees are a little bit high. It's not a gold wing. It's not, you know, a V-Strom. But for a sporty naked bike, it's really not bad. The reach to the bars is reasonable. I don't feel uncomfortable like I'm curled up on a sport bike. I have decent enough leg room, and I'm comfortable riding this bike for a couple hours. Do I want to ride it, you know, 8 hours a day? Not really, but you could. Overall, I find the ergonomics to be pretty decent, and the reach to the ground is very, very easy.
Okay, let me do like a 0 to 70 miles an hour to 0 test on the bike. Well, it helps if I start in first gear. Come on, dummy. So there's 0 to 70 to 0. Not bad at all, actually. The brakes are pretty decent for what they are, and the ABS works well. That was a full ABS stop. Yeah, leaning all the way into the brakes again. No issues. I mean, you know, if you do this at a racetrack, you're going to overheat the brakes probably doing that, but really not too bad at all.
Let's quickly cover the specs on the Z500. So our wet weight fully fueled up is 370 pounds or 168 kilograms. Fuel capacity, 3.7 gallons or 14 liters, giving you a pretty good fuel range. The bike's pretty economical. So that fuel range is probably around 150 miles or about 240 kilometers, based on around 50 miles a gallon or 4.7 liters per 100 kilometer. Depends on how fast you ride and how you use your right wrist. Engine displacement. Let's talk about the engine on this thing. So it's 451cc parallel twin. Horsepower is 51 horsepower at 10,000 RPM. It redlines at 11,000. Torque is 32 foot-pounds or 43 Newton meters at 7,500 RPM. Transmission is a 6-speed slip assist clutch chain drive. It also has Kawasaki's positive neutral finder, which is great because when you're trying to shift up from first gear to neutral, it will not let you go into second gear, so you won't have that weird thing where you can't find neutral. So I really like Kawasaki, that feature that Kawasaki offers. I think it's great. Suspension travel is about 5 inches or 125 millimeters front and back. The only adjustment you have on your suspension is going to be a preload adjuster in the back. You don't have any other adjustments on your suspension. Tires and wheels, 17-inch wheels front and back, and you have Dunlop Sport Max GPR 300 tires. Our brakes, single 310 millimeter front disc with a 2-piston caliper. The rear is a 220 millimeter with a 2-piston caliper, and ABS is standard. Let's take a tour, walk around, show you some of the features and how things work here on our Z500. So starting up at the very front of the bike, you can see our very stylish LED lights here for high and low beam, which are new for the Z500. That was a nice update versus the outgoing 400 model. You can see my SE model here has this windscreen. You also got LED turn signals here on the SE model. You can see the standard front forks. You don't get upside down front forks at this price point. And again, there's no adjustments on your front forks. The front fender here with your ABS. ABS is standard, so you get a little sticker there for that. You can see the red wheel and kind of the interesting wheel design here, front axle. And you can see our front brake here is a single-sided disc with a 2-piston caliper. You can also see our test bike, the SE model, has this radiator screen, which is great if you have rocks or stones that get kicked up. It's a nice additional feature there to protect your radiator. Working our way around the sides, you can kind of see the side fairings. I really like these kind of crash bumpers or little tip-over bars here that mount to the frame. Not that I've tested these, but they do work. Don't ask me how I know that. You can see a little bit of a lower cowl or kind of engine, not skid plate. That's what we would call it on adventure bikes, but just a little lower plastic piece to kind of make this look a little bit nicer down here and clean up the styling. You can see you've got an adjustable shifter here. You would adjust it by loosening these lock nuts here and then turning that. You can see our foot peg with our foot peg feelers. Yeah, side stand. You can see our trellis frame coming kind of back through here with some plastic covers, the passenger pegs. You've got a helmet lock here. The seat release is a key, and that's going to be right there. You can see our chain drive, chain cover, rear axle. Nothing really remarkable to talk about here. You can see also the preload adjuster on the rear shock is right there. It's a step style preload adjuster. I like to show you the lighting on the bikes. So here are your LED rear turn signals, your rear LED tail and stop light. And then so I don't forget, you can see the lighting on the front. You can see those LED headlights and then your LED turn signals as well. And I do like the fact that they gave us hazard flashers. That's a nice feature. And a lot of bikes at this price point don't come with hazard flashers. You can see our rear fender assembly here, working our way around our exhaust pipe, which is, exhaust pipes have just gotten really bulky on modern motorcycles because of smog and emissions requirements and noise requirements. That's just what happens. Nothing too remarkable. Working our way around the right side of the engine, you get an oil sight glass, which is convenient versus having like, a dipstick. Pretty good sized fuel tank. You can see our rider seat. And then this SE model comes with the cowl over the small rear passenger seat. A bike like this is really not great for passengers. You can, and this cowl can come off, but they're just not the best for that. You might want to look at something a little bit bigger if you're doing a lot of stuff with passengers. All right, so let's jump in here and take a look at our cockpit and controls. You can see our mirrors have really good adjustments. They're pretty good mirrors. I do see my shoulder quite a bit. They don't come out maybe quite far enough. I'd like to extend those a little bit. The levers, you don't have any adjustments on your levers for reach, but that's okay. You have a cable clutch there where you can adjust your tension. Hazard flashers, high and low beam, turn signals, horn, the tubular handlebar, which is nice. You can see the top of our forks here. Key, which is very basic. on and off switch, start switch. So the controls are very, very basic. And then let's look at our TFT. So it's always hard to do this without getting too much glare. So on the SE model, you get this nice TFT screen. And I really appreciate this. This is similar to some of their higher end models. And I think this is well worth that fight. It's part of that $700 upcharge for the SE model. So you get a tachometer here, you get a speedometer, gear indicator, fuel gauge, and then some different displays down here, a clock, and then you can scroll through. So if I hit the left button, if I hit my left button here, you can see I scroll through odometer, trip A, trip B. So that's good, and you can reset things. And then if I hit my right button here, it changes the lower info screen. So average speed, total time, battery voltage, instantaneous miles per gallon, average miles per gallon, fuel range. Really, really nice set of information you can get. And it's really nice on a day-to-day basis to be able to have access to that kind of information. So really great little TFT. I really, really like it.
Okay, let's put this thing through some corners and see how she goes. You! You know, it gives you a lot of the thrills and sensation of riding a more expensive, you know, more powerful sport bike or a sport, you know, naked bike, but for a fraction of the price and a much more usable amount of power. It just has the perfect amount of power. It really does. Now the handling is great. It's really agile. You know, the tires are kind of narrow, so it really just flicks through the corners really easily. I will tell you, the suspension is not great. It's kind of, you know, bouncy and stuff, but that's what you expect on a $6,000 motorcycle. You know, you don't expect top shelf suspension. It's okay. It's fine. It's just nothing great, and you know, you don't really have any adjustments there. We've talked about the brakes. Those are good. But man, I can't tell you how much fun this is. It's just so light and small and agile. To just throw this thing up a mountain road, it's just, and I've already caught up to the traffic, of course, it's just so much fun to be out here and do this on this bike. Small bikes are the way to go. I'm really telling you. You know, I've ridden an R1 on a track and R6 and R7 and different size bikes, you know, 1200s, 1300s, Hayabusas, all this stuff, right? But I gotta say, these smaller motorcycles, there's just some magic to them because you can use all the power without going straight to jail. It's more engaging, it's more fun, you build your skills better, they cost less money, they cost less to insure. I mean, there's just so much to be said for these smaller so-called starter bikes. Or I just don't like the stigma that some people give, like, oh, that's a girl's bike, that's a beginner's bike. That's absolute nonsense, and just don't listen to people who say things like that. It's just so silly, because there's a lot of really more experienced riders who choose to ride bikes with smaller engines and lower price tags. There's a lot of good reasons to have a bike like this. They're just, in many ways, they're more fun than the bigger, more powerful, so-called better motorcycles. Okay, one thing that I do notice that I really don't like about the bike is the mirrors are very buzzy. They have a lot of blur in the mirrors, so anything above about 55 miles an hour, so anything on the highway basically, like, I know you can't really see it in the video, but the mirrors, I can't see, like, if there's, you know, a Chevy Corvette behind me or a highway patrol cruiser. I can't really tell because the mirrors are just buzzy, and it gets worse the faster you go. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
Talking about maintenance requirements on the Z500, our minor service interval, which is going to be your oil change, chain adjustments, basic checks like that, is 7,600 miles or 12,000 kilometers. And your major service interval, which is your valve adjustment, potentially spark plugs, air filters, things like that get more expensive, that's going to be 15,000 miles or 24,000 kilometers. Maintenance is pretty simple on a bike like this, and then you do have a chain drive, so you're going to need to clean, lubricate, and adjust the tension on your drive chain periodically. But beyond that, a motorcycle like this is relatively low maintenance and pretty easy to own. All right, what about the competition for the Kawasaki Z500? So looking at my notes here, I think that there's 3 or 4 bikes that you're probably cross-shopping this with. The Honda CB500F, the CFMOTO 450 NK, which I also have for review right now, and I'm filming that in a couple weeks, so stay tuned for that review, and the KTM Duke 390. So of all these bikes, I would say that the Honda is the most Honda-like, and what I mean is that it's kind of the most grown up, most refined. It can be a little bit boring. The Honda just doesn't quite have, it's like it's really good all around, but it just doesn't quite have the excitement factor that some of these others do. The engine's just a little bit more subdued. The CFMOTO is interesting because the main difference with the CFMOTO, it's still a parallel twin, but what CFMOTO did was they used a 270-degree crank, and it gives the motor much more character, much more of a deeper sound, much more personality, and I just much prefer that engine just for myself. The KTM, so the Duke 390 is going to be your sportiest, most athletic, probably best handling of the bunch. I think it's also probably the lightest. But keep in mind that KTM is a single-cylinder motorcycle, so there is going to be more vibration involved than with the parallel twins you get in the Ninja, the Z, the CFMOTO, the Honda, and other bikes in the category. I think the Z500 stacks up really well, especially now that they've, made the motor bigger, they've added some features. I think as an overall balance between, comfort, performance, price, reliability, features, fun to ride, good handling, I think the Z500 is really close to the top if you just look at overall balance when you factor everything in together. But all the bikes in the category are pretty good, so I would highly recommend you test ride or sit on or whatever you can do to look at all the bikes in this segment before you make your final decision. Okay, I've got some audience questions that you all sent in about the Z500. This person says, this Kawasaki versus the Honda NX500 versus the Triumph Scrambler 400 versus a KTM Duke 390. So you're getting some adventure bikes mixed in there. So the NX500 and the Scrambler 400 are more of that a little bit all-around capability with a little bit of off-road thrown in and that adventure styling. So that's not really an apples to orange comparison. I do think that my personal feeling is, looking at small adventure bikes or small scramblers, I think I like those better because you get a little bit more of that all-around capability, a little bit more upright riding position, a little better comfort, and you get a little bit of off-road capability thrown in there as well with something like the NX500 or even the Scrambler 400. So yeah, you should look at those. But I think, some people fall more on the sporty side of motorcycling. They really want to stick with that. But more and more people are getting into the adventure bike stuff now. So yeah, you should look at small adventure bikes or crossover bikes because they become really good. Okay, there was a lot of questions about Kawasaki. Where the heck is the Versys 500X or X500? What if Kawasaki could take this engine and put it in an adventure bike chassis, right? So they have the Versys X300 with that tiny little 300 engine. Why not use this motor and put it in a Versys and upgrade it a little bit? You'd have a killer, amazing bike that so many people would buy. I don't know why Kawasaki isn't doing it. Kawasaki, if you're listening, please do that because we all want that. Someone else asked, could you budget tour on this? Will it do long highway miles, even at the speed limit, 80 plus miles per hour? Yeah, of course. I mean, a little bit of soft luggage, maybe a little bit bigger windshield. I mean, the motor's perfectly happy to go 80 miles an hour or 130, 140 kilometers an hour. It's just fine. It's a twin cylinder. 50 horsepower is plenty. The bike's, relatively comfortable. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's not a gold wing, but it's not bad at all, and you can tour on any motorcycle, even smaller bikes. How does this compare to a 450 Supermoto? Wonder if I should get this or try to find a decent supermoto for more money. Supermoto is a very different kind of bike. You know, it's designed for like super quick handling on like a go-kart track or around town. Supermoto is like a dirt bike kind of thing with street tires, so very different. You're not getting any wind protection there. You're sitting very upright, and on top of it, it has that dirt bike feel. You know, that's a very different kind of motorcycle, very different riding experience. It's not better or worse. It's just very, very different. I think you have to really ask yourself, what do you really want? If you want a supermoto, just get a supermoto. If you want a sporty naked, get the Z500. Can you feel the difference in torque versus the 400? Does the continuously lowering RPM range suck? I think he's saying, you know, as these displacements get bigger, are we getting less RPM, like less lower red lines? I mean, not really. The torque is noticeable. I think it's a good improvement, and I agree with the bigger engine. Some of this displacement creep that we see is because of emissions targets they have to meet. So if they bump up the displacement a little bit and give us a little more torque and tune things a bit differently, they can kind of cut the emission a little bit for the tailpipe emissions to meet Euro 5, Euro 6, whatever those things are. So you see that. I think that it's a good side effect because we get more torque. I don't think they're any less fun because of it, but that's just my opinion. Where is it made? I believe it's made in Thailand, but correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody knows for sure. Is the Ninja a better choice than the Z? We talked about that in the comparisons. You just have to decide, do you want the styling of the Ninja with the full fairing and the sport bike look, or do you want the naked styling and the lower insurance cost and the less plastics to break of the Z and the slightly more comfortable ergonomics of the naked bike? That's not right or wrong. You just have to decide what's best for you. All right, let me give you my review summary or pro and con summary for the Z500. The pros to this bike, in my opinion, it's lightweight, it's accessible, it's easy to ride, easy to get on, easy to push around a garage. It's just friendly. The next thing is the low seat height that kind of ties into the number one thing I just said. The ergonomics, I think, are pretty comfortable for a sporty naked bike. You know, it's a comfortable motorcycle. The engine size, I think, is perfect. It's kind of the Goldilocks engine size, in my opinion. You know, I've ridden like the 250s and 300s. I just find them to be not enough power. But then you get into some of the 800s and 900s and it's like overkill. This 450 to 500cc parallel twin, man, 50 horsepower, it's just perfect for the street. And it's friendly for beginner riders, but it's enough to keep more expert riders happy as well. Another pro, I really like the overall equipment that you get with this SE model, especially things, you know, like the TFT dash. I really like the dash on this bike. So I definitely recommend getting the SE model if you can spare $700 more. And finally, as a pro for me, is the price. I think right around $6,000, this is a very, very good deal. Downsides for me, let me show you one of the downsides. So I didn't show this when I did the ergonomic thing or the riding position, but if you can see here, this exhaust shield, depending on how I position my foot and how I'm riding, if I try to bring my, and these are size 12 boots, I wear a size 12, ladies. If I bring this further back, it kind of hits the exhaust. You kind of just get used to it and end up sort of riding with your toe in a little bit, or your foot a little bit more forward or angled down. But if you try to ride kind of like that, you end up hitting the exhaust. So it's a downside, but not a deal breaker. The other downside for me, the only other downside I can really think of is, well, there's two. One is that the engine doesn't have a lot of soul or character. It's a little bit bland feeling, a little bit vacuum cleaner sound, but that's what happens with these 180-degree crank parallel twins. The other thing for me is the vibration. There's a little bit of buzziness, you know, above 70 miles an hour, about 110, 115 kilometers an hour. The engine's a little buzzy, not terrible. It's not as smooth as the CFMOTO 450. You should test one of those if you can. Those are very smooth. It's not terrible, but it's something I want to mention. Okay, gear check for the ride today. I'm wearing the Alpenstars ventilated street boots. I'm wearing a Climb I think these are the K43 riding jeans. Love these. This is a Sidisi Marco II mesh jacket for warm summer, which we're in. And then I don't have it with me right now, but I'm using the Arai Contour X helmet. and then I'm using a pair of Revit Off-Track 2 gloves. So check out the links below to check out any of this gear. I do receive commissions from those links as a disclaimer, but I appreciate that. It's a way to support the channel. Final thoughts on Kawasaki's Z500. I really feel that with the bump up in displacement and torque, they've really made an incredible motorcycle even better. The price is very reasonable. The quality is very good. You have the reliability that we've come to expect from a company like Kawasaki. It handles well, it's quick enough, it's fun to ride, it's relatively comfortable. There's really not very little to complain about here. And I think this is kind of one of these Goldilocks motorcycles that more expert riders can appreciate, maybe using it on the track, something that you can use all the power, 50 horsepower, but it's also something friendly for more beginner riders. And I think this is probably the perfect kind of motorcycle to get if you're more of a beginner, but you want something that you're not going to outgrow, like some of the 300 class bikes. So I highly recommend you check out the Z500. It's a fantastic motorcycle and I've really enjoyed my time with it. If you want to support Big Rock Moto and what I do here, there's ways to do that down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please ride safe and I'll see you out there.